Welcome to the Goldenberg Destiny Project. This is episode 9. So now we're finally ready to talk about the ancient world. After many episodes of preparation, but they're important. So now, before we again, another thing before. But before we talk about it, I'd like to present you with a hypothetical. A question. Let's say there's an anthropology department in a major university is doing a study of lawyers in the 19th century. The 1800s, at that time lawyers weren't making so much money. Today, what motivates people to be lawyers? There's a lot of money in law. But then there wasn't so much, and so what motivated people to become lawyers? So doing a study of the lawyers of the 19th century, and they look at their background, and also he tried to get information about their selves. What kind of people were they? So one of them suggested they're going to do research. They want to get the DNA of these lawyers, and DNA lasts in bones for hundreds of years. So they want to exhume lawyers of the 19th century, of the 1800s, to exhume a number of lawyers and take DNA samples and study them and see if genetically they could find some kind of pattern for people that had decided to become lawyers, and perhaps even to exhume Abraham Lincoln, who was a great lawyer, and maybe exhume him too and study his DNA, and they will advance the science of anthropology. So, what would you say to that? Would you say it's okay? I think most people in their right minds would be scandalized. What do you mind? Go dig up lawyers because you want to figure out something, or study the anthropology of lawyers in the 1800s? How can you do such a thing? Yeah, it's really incredible. But let me tell you about something else that happened. In about 100 years ago, archaeologists in Egypt, in the Valley of the Kings, which is not far from the pyramids, that's where they had burial chambers. Some pharaohs were buried in the pyramids, and others were buried in the Valley of the Kings. And they discovered when they buried the kings there, they used to bury them with a lot of really very precious artifacts, gold and jewels and all kind ivory and all kind, maybe ivory, I'm not sure, but all kinds of things, and they used to bury them, and they were afraid of having people should come and rob the grave robbers. So they used to conceal the burial chambers, and it was hard to find them. And they weren't always successful, of course. But the archaeologist, I think his name was Carter, they discovered a burial chamber in the Valley of the Kings, and they opened it up. And this was the burial chamber of King Tut Syndrome. He was about 4,000 years ago, about a little bit less maybe, and they discovered his burial chamber, and there was this big sarcophagus, this big coffin, stone coffin, and there was a lot of nobody had ever robbed it, and there was a lot of stuff there, a lot of very precious, beautiful, ancient stuff. And they opened up the sarcophagus, and they found, they found a coffin, and the coffin was wood inlaid with gold. And then they opened up that one, and there was a cloth there, and they took away the cloth, and they found another coffin in there, and this was also a very beautiful inlaid coffin, and they took it out. And then they opened up that coffin, and they found a third coffin inside, and this third coffin was pure gold. It wasn't inlaid with gold. It was solid gold with all kinds of beautiful designs on it and inscriptions. And they opened that coffin up. And they found the mummy of King Tut. They found his mummified body in there. And they took it out, and they wanted to study it. So they took it to wherever they took it, and they unwrapped it. And when they unwrapped it, the head fell off, and the arms fell off, and the legs fell off. So, but they took each one, they x-rayed the body, they x-rayed the head, and the arms and the legs, and they tried to study it and figure out. And this was all in interest of science, of Egyptology. What is the science of Egyptology? The study of the ancient Egypt, its culture, its history. Nobody is going to be cured from cancer as a result of the study of Egyptology. There won't be peace on the world as a study of Egyptology. It's just an academic interest of academia to know about, and I understand that. There's intellectual curiosity. You want to know about ancient Egypt. It makes sense. But they took out his body and they unwrapped it, they x-rayed it, they took all the stuff from the burial chamber and took it to the Cairo Museum. He had on his face, he had like a burial mask, a solid gold burial mask. It all went to the museum. In 1972, they sent all of it they didn't send the body, I don't think so, but they sent all of it to England for a display in London of all these unbelievable ancient artifacts. And then in 2007, they returned the mummified body to the burial chamber in a climate-controlled glass case. And you could go in there, if you're a tourist, you could go in there. I don't know if it's free or you have to buy a ticket, and you could go walk by this glass case, and you could look at the mummified King Tut. This is what happened now. How could that be? Can you imagine doing this to Abraham Lincoln? How could you do this? This is a king. He's buried. The sanctity of the grave, respect for the dead. He just like nothing. You take it out in the interest of science. You take these things out, photograph them, study them. They were put into his burial chamber. That was the ancient custom. This is how you bury a king. You put him in a coffin, a gold coffin, put stuff around him, and you seal it. Why didn't he deserve the respect? How could that be? It's incredible. Really incredible. I'm going to give you an answer, but even after the answer, it's still incredible. But I think this is the answer. And, I read a little bit about this, and they were a little bit conflicted, but he said, well, it's in the interest of science. The science of Egyptology. I mean, what? So, I think that they're coming from a perspective of evolution, that people are evolved ultimately from microbes and became this, became that, and until us today. That's us. But everything's evolved. They look at the people of ancient times, and maybe not consciously, but instinctively. They look at the people of ancient times as an earlier stage of the evolution of the human race today. They were smart and they were rich and they were talented, but they were not us. They weren't us. They were proto-us. And they don't deserve the same respect that we give to other people of the human race. This is what the thought is, and this is, I don't know if it was ever articulated this way, but I think that's what's at the root of it. Because for the interests of Egyptology, you could do such a thing. What's the difference between you and a grave robber? What's the difference? These are people that are buried, and you should respect. You wouldn't like them to do it to you. Why would you do it to them? You wouldn't dream of doing it to the lawyers of the 1800s, certainly not Abraham Lincoln, but not even any small-town lawyer. You don't do this kind of thing, but you do it here, because they are not us. So this is to understand the ancient world. You have to understand that we are not superior to the people of those times. We're not smarter than them. We're not more intelligent than them. We have the advantage of many, many layers of technology. Over the years, this on top of this, on top of that. If you took a person from our time and you transported him back into the ancient world somehow, somehow a time machine, put him back in the ancient world, he wouldn't be any better than anybody else. And the cell phone in his pocket, it wouldn't work. So he wouldn't have anything. He couldn't make a cell phone. He wouldn't know what to do. But he just has, today, in our time, you have the cell phone, you take it, you push the button, it works. That doesn't make you better, doesn't make you smarter. You're just standing on the technology of ancient times, of all of history. But if you think about ancient times, they were very, very advanced technologically. Look what these people did in the ancient times. They invented writing. They developed animal husbandry. They took animals and they domesticated them and they used them for work and for food. They developed agriculture. They made methods of agriculture and agricultural tools, and they were able to cultivate and sow, big fields and produce big harvests instead of just doing something in your backyard in a hole in the ground. They made irrigation systems. They built palaces. They wrote songs. They made musical instruments to play the songs on. They did incredible things, incredible. And okay, so today we take all those things for granted. But I don't know, I would think maybe in certain ways they were superior to us, because at least they had the advantage of silence. They could walk around sometime and think, and they weren't bombarded constantly with ads and messages from the radios and the TVs and the billboards and who knows what, all the time. We are constantly bombarded. Our minds are not serene. So it's difficult sometimes to really think. And in those times they didn't have that. So they were able to really think. Are we more advanced morally? I don't think so. I think that our times are at least as savage as any time in history. The savagery that we've seen just in the last 100 years was probably the most savage century in history. So in what way are we superior to them? What makes us different? What makes us better? What makes us superior? Not. So you look at the ancient world. You have to think of it as just our time, but at a different time. Things are happening. The same people, the same talents, same intelligence. They are us. Why also? First of all, it's important to understand this when you're talking about the ancient world. But there's another point I want to make over here, a very important point. We're going now into discussions about ancient history. The most important, richest record of what happened in ancient history is the Torah, the Bible. That is, a tremendous, tremendous resource. And there are other things. There are inscriptions on steles. Steles are these huge stone slabs that kings or people used to inscribe, like the records of their victories. There are different kinds of papyri that have survived, that have some kind of story. There are cuneiform tablets, where these wax tablets that used to have wedge writing on it. There are different forms that have ink on parchment. There are different forms, but really the most substantial, greatest record of ancient times is the Torah, is Chumash and Nevi'im. That is the most important. Until classical times, where the Greeks and the Romans, they produced many, many books, and they have a large record. But prior to the second half of the first millennium before the Common Era, then there was hardly anything else except for the Torah. So really, the Torah is extremely important, and we in the House of Classical Judaism look at it for what it is. It's the holy word of God, and it's true, and we accept it. And we spoke through the early episodes why we believe this and why we're convinced of this. And as we go on, we will start talking about the contents of the Torah. But in the secular humanism, the secular world does not want the Torah to be accepted, because that would mean that there's a God, and that would mean that there's a God who communicates with the human race, a God who has certain requirements from the human race, and that they don't want. So in the 19th century, now for thousands of years, it was accepted. The Christians, Muslims, it was all accepted. This is the Bible, and this is true, this is the Word of God. Except for the Greeks, which we will talk about the Greeks when we come to them. But in the 19th century, there were two attacks, two major assaults on the credibility of the Torah. One of them was evolution. The idea that we are not created by God, that we evolved ourselves from microorganisms, that the world, that, maybe God doesn't exist, or if he does exist, he's irrelevant, it has nothing to do with us, we do what we decide is right, what we want to do. And the idea of evolution was really extremely, I don't know if that was Darwin's intent, but certainly the way that the academic world embraced evolution, the way they embraced it, was driven very much by an antagonism to Judeo-Christian religion, Judeo-Christian principles. Now, that is an entire subject that we will discuss when we come to the 19th century, the history of evolutionary biology. There's a lot to say about that. We will, Mirz Hashem, talk about it, and I'll try not to overload you, but to give it to you in concise form. The other attack on the Torah was something called Bible criticism. That was Wellhausen, the Prolegomena to the History of Israel, and many, many others, and developed. And this is, again, a given in academia. Just like evolution was very much embraced by academia, Bible criticism was very much embraced by academia. The Bible criticism says that the Torah was not written at the time it claims to have been written. It was not written in deep antiquity, 1,000 years before before the Common Era. It was written much, much later, and it was put together from many different documents. And there's the E document, and the J document, and the P document, and the D document, and there are many sub-documents, and it was cut into pieces from these different documents, and they were spliced together. And they're something called a pious fraud. It was sold to the people as a genuine book, but it really wasn't. And they put it together from many different documents. And they have many things that they point to. For instance, the Torah starts with the creation story in the first chapter, and the second chapter has another creation story, which is Zeh Sefer Toldos Adam, and it's not identical to the first chapter. There are differences. So, we if we learn the Torah, we understand that it's written from a different angle, different perspective, and making different points. But they said no, it came from two different documents, and it was put together. There are numerous contradictions and things which they inconsistencies, anachronisms, numerous flaws that they point out, which show that this is not an original organic document. It was put together from many from different documents and different sources, and this is what they say. Now, how would somebody who's sitting down to write a book? Somebody writes a book. He writes one chapter, and then he writes the second chapter, and he contradicts himself in the first chapter. A person wouldn't do that. He would only do that if he hasn't written both chapters. He just spliced them together. So if some people or group or whatever are trying to produce a document and convince the people that this is really Torah Sinai and this is a genuine document, how would they do such a thing to have two contradictory chapters, one after the other? How would they do that? It would make no sense. Many, many different things. I'm not going to get it all of it. As we go through the period, the biblical period, I will point out many things to you. But why would they do such a thing? And second of all, if they did such a thing, how about all the people that were duped? All the people that accepted these as real, as a genuine document. Didn't they see, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense. No, they did it, everybody was duped, and it became the most influential book in the history of the world by far. How could that be? The answer is that we don't understand how this happened, but they were not us. They were other people. There was a different time. We know that they were brilliant, they were talented, they were able to put together a book that had such a tremendous influence on the civilization of the world. But why did nobody realize that it was full of contradictions? How are we supposed to know? They were not us. This is what I call the King Tut Syndrome. They were not us, but the truth is they were us. A few months ago, I published a book called The Hesterville Bible Trial. The purpose of the book is to combat these Bible critics or minimal archaeologists, and to show, and what I did was, instead of just writing a book about it, I made a novel, and I made a Bible trial, that there was some kind of a trial about the authenticity of the Bible, and every witness that testifies in this trial is representing a book by a professor. Everything is, the testimonies themselves are not fictional. These are what professors say. But all of these testimonies are put to cross-examination to point out the flaws in each side. And I think it was a pretty fair treatment, and I gave the other side fair treatment. And I think that it would be useful. You could go to the website, RabbiReinman.com. You could see already posted the prologue and the first and second chapter. Soon I'm going to serialize the book on the website. So the third chapter will be posted this week. And you could read it and you could get introduced to it. And I think it's very important that you learn about these things and you understand that these arguments are baseless, and understand where they're coming from. These two assaults, evolution and Bible criticism, were an attack on the credibility of the Torah, to undermine it and to leave space for secular humanism. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you again next time.